Jody, I'm so excited to reconnect with you. It's funny, we started the Femme Futurists Society as a way to meet these women that were in that Forbes list of the top 50 female futurists and have these kinds of exchanges to get to know someone's work and get to know who they are and figure we might as well video them and share them with the world as we're doing this exploratory. But this is a case where I get to reconnect with someone that I met at the very beginning of my sort of shift into futurism, probably around the same time that you were thinking about some of your work, and have lost touch with them a long time. So it's really exciting to reconnect with you, Jody Turner. Thank you for...
It's wonderful to connect with you again.
As we were just sort of saying in the warm-up, I do find this interesting, the way that relationships kind of come in and out of your life at different points in time. And I find that to be one of the most magical things about life. So I'm really excited that we get to now find each other here. And I find your work fascinating. I always think it's great when I get to look up one of my friends and they've got Wikipedia pages. I'm like, look at that. That just made it all so handy. I'm like, congrats on your Wikipedia page. So the way that the arc of these things is a 5-minute less or so story about how you got to sort of where you are. If you want to give us because I think it's always interesting for people to kind of know what the path was or the pull was that pulled you into these various places, and then what you're working on right now that you're really excited about, and sort of how it's being expressed. So what are you passionate about and how is it showing up? Would be great to hear in the next 40 minutes or so. We're not strict about the time, so if we end up chatting longer, that's great. And if we don't, I'm sure that will not be less; it will only be more. And if we go into the personal side of our lives, I think that's fun too, because I think part of what we're trying to do is it's a conversation, not an interview. We get to just explore you and your work and what you're excited about. And so,
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So where are you now? Even in what part of the world are you sitting?
Right now, I'm in Portland, Oregon, which is always my come back to place because of its, beauty and really creative people. No matter what's going on in the world politically, Portland always has a creative contingent, and like Brooklyn, it has its amazing, passionate force, to be reckoned with. And I love being around that energy. And it's primarily because of Wieden & Kennedy, the global ad agency, and also because of Nike being here, right. And Adidas being here, and the Under Armour Innovation Lab being here, but also because there's a Chinese sneaker company here, and also On Shoes, the wonderful Swiss shoe brand that is also here. It the whole sneaker culture, which I was really kind of.
It's interesting because I always compare Portland to Austin because I'm in Austin now, right?
Yes.
When I was in LA, and I've now been in Austin for 13 years, and I'm always trying to do this sort of compare and contrast between Portland and Austin, because on the one hand they seem similar, on the other hand they're so different in terms of cultural personalities and the kinds of businesses that are there, and at the same time I think have that tension, right, between hyper progressive and very non-progressive, whatever that the staunch want to hold on to,
Yeah.
And so we definitely feel that, not so much in Austin, but surrounded in Austin. I think in Portland you feel it more in the actual center of Portland, I think.
Yeah, it's true.
So tell us how you got to where you are at this moment. I know it isn't possible to do this in 5 minutes, but just the key highlight of what's sort of the turning point for.
Just to kind of backtrack, what I love about what you're doing is that you are asking all of these different women, how did you find your way into futurism? Because the truth is, everyone has a different story. There are so many different types of futurisms and approach to future thinking, and I call it future leaning. Now, I never hear people talk about it that way. I have studied futurism to understand what it is, the way in the future, and I've done projects 2030, 2050, but really I'm a future leaning, meaning how do we help people with concepts about what people are into, what the marketplace is doing, that are future leaning, that kind of indicate where we're going and how we can pick up that baton, and how do we help each other kind of holding hands, moving forward, kumbaya, into a future that will be, helping us define things in a newer and better way. People like you and I are really so driven. If we have this sort of core missive, and it helps us to have energy that never ends. And if you think about my long career, this is how I have been able to move forward, is the energy that never ends, that is here to kind of serve kind of a better future. But we need to do it in pragmatic steps. And so that's why I call it future leaning.
So tell me about the missive. So if you were going to sum up your missive, do you have it tightly scripted?
Yeah, I do. In speaking with Emma earlier, I would say we were talking about, for me, I started out more in design and very more inward. And then there came a time when I realized I was at the end of the line. I was like helping things look beautiful, and I have a love of beauty and the graces. And I was, helping communication. It's been my focus, in school and in my early career. How do we communicate in ways that people can receive it with visual and symbol and word? And what happened with that is I was at the end of the line always, whether I was at Nike doing retail design. I was not at the beginning with the concepts of the direction we're going in. And I always felt like I had that as my main gift, to understand the beginning of the line. I was always doing things in advance, teaching yoga. I was helping bring things in always as kind of a trend person. And I didn't know it. I just did it naturally. In all of my design choices, color choices, I had a sense of what was coming. And it was a studied sense, but it didn't appear to be that way. So as I began to be this way, I realized I can't be at the end of the line. I have to be at the beginning of the line. And many things kicked me to the beginning of the line. But how do you as a woman, when the world is not open to you, how do you as a woman then step forward? Considering my confidence level was at a certain point. Well, what you do is you think, well, what is my mission? And when you connect with your mission, you will stand up there, you will take all the flack, you will do whatever it takes in order to bring forward this new world that we are all working on. And so my mission was influencing for future betterment.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
Yeah, and it's simple, but that was my Culture of Future consultancy. Is really just, Culture of Future is not a business. It's a concept. It's a way of living. And so people always kept saying your business, Culture of Future. It's me bringing forward ideas. It's others putting ideas into that. Right. So really, for me, Culture of Future was an invitation for people to come in and feel their own missive. And so as I began to speak around the world, Rainier Evers, trend watching, asked me to speak around the world. I stood up there and was asking people to understand their own missive, to understand their own way, and how they could bring that forward in whatever they do. And I taught them ways of viewing the world so that then they could begin to work with it as modular systems within their business. And this is how we have to help bring in the new world. And I went from being a seed planter of these ideas, seeing books being written, whatever, after I would travel through, like the minstrel gossip, I'd bring ideas that I'd gleaned and synthesized. That's my other, power, is synthesizing lots of information into a communication that will help others feel they can run with it. Because if you don't have the words, you don't have the focus. We are very word oriented. And so once the word begins, then people will pick it up and run with it. That was my purpose. And then, like you, I came to a point where it's got to go further. And so I started working inside of companies and contracts, outside of company as a Culture of Future idea driver, inside of companies full-time, outside of companies as a culture. And this sort of way of working back and forth is unique. Yeah. People don't understand it, but what it is it's being able to always get the big picture and to see where we're going, and yet always be able to come inside and see the micro picture of how we're implementing.
Yes, that's an interesting thing. So I'm going to stop you there for a second, because I think that's an interesting perspective. Because when we talk about the future of work or working, that will be one part of again, this thing that I keep describing where I call it status fluid, right? Where we're not hooked onto it has to be in this form or in this shape or in this kind of prescribed thing forever. Whether it's full-time or part-time or gig or that gig or inside or outside, it's almost so much more permeable. But what have you learned when you go, because I have done a bit of that, not as much as you have, but I've done a bit of where you go in and you have, there's a different perspective from being inside an organization, being part of the team, but then you also get to see some of the places where it is stunted or calcified or I guess let me just not saying it anyway articulately. I have found more empathy when I'm inside an organization about why it is so hard to grow and change, but I've also found where the blocks are that I want to go back outside into the world to help relieve. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And then also see where the passion is, right? And figure out a way to be able to amplify that. So what have you found in your, as you think about going back and forth across that membrane?
That's a great question. So as early on, we were defining what we are in this world we're doing. And I met Rainier Evers, who really was defining the whole free information platform system in trend and in ideas. And so he was the originator of that. In fact, when he and I talk about, we first met, we were both speaking in France at a round table and in the Riviera area, but we were staying in Cannes at this luxury, Yeah. And so he said we both ran into each other because we had our phones and our computers and we were wandering around looking for the best internet connection. And he's like, really? You're also looking for the internet connection? It's like everybody else was here, doing their France lounge thing on the horizon. And I'm like, yeah, I've got business to do. And so that's where it started with us. And what he saw in me when I spoke, and what I saw in him is that we are igniting new ways of being, but we have to then teach others how to do this. It can't be just our prerogative, our domain, our ownership. And his business in particular, he was finding it difficult when he would come to corporations and he would share this incredible trend watching platform, which we have a lot of those now, but trend watching is still one of the best. And so he would say that, here's this information, and then people would hoard it because they wanted to move up vertically. And so he said he had trouble getting his subscribership up because no one would share it, laterally. And then this is exactly what went on in corporation back then, is people were not open sharing. And this is what we have been working on, you and I, Emma, we've been working on this for years to help open up that paradigm. And of course, Rainier built an incredible business out of it. I did it just simply because as a woman, you are here, in my opinion, as a woman, I am here to help open the paradigm. And we need to open the paradigm in order for women to be invited in order for a cultural diversity to happen. And so this was my missive, opening the paradigm. So he hired me to speak around the world to all of these different brands, companies, conferences on multiple topics, from retail to technology to I spoke with coaches, business coaches, everything from how we do business to how we sell, and everything that I did was really about bringing forward an authenticity before authenticity was trendy. And and I gave of myself. I traveled for 8 years around the world multiple times.
Wow.
From Ghana, speaking with young women entrepreneurs, to Brazil multiple times, speaking in the middle of the country on design and what it truly means to design, for interior. And so everything from practical to Yale, speaking with libraries of 20 libraries on what is the future of information and how we capture it and how we share it. I mean, these are things that I've done multiple times. And then to LA on what's the future of entertainment. All of these, the intersecting point is really trend, insight, consumer insight, and future marketplace.
Yeah, because I think that the people, what I try and educate, so the distinction between a trend and a shift, right? So when you talk about the work that you've done, because I think in the early days there was a lot of it because it was communication centric. That was a lot on the trend stuff, right? So whether you talk about color or whether you talk about culturally or whether you talk about whatever, but then there was this moment where I realized for my work that there were bigger shifts that were happening and that they were much longer term. So I go back to work that I've done 10 or 15 years ago and it's still relevant. Like the things that we were identifying at the time seemed like we were right at the edge of something, or only things that have grown in importance and an impact. So if you think about this, does that continuum make sense to you, that like you've got sort of fad, trend, shift, big, huge
yes
things?
And that's what I really defined at the very beginning so that we could understand what it is, because I found when I first stepped out of doing design communication in the trend group for Nike and to doing, in my transitional role long ago in contract at Starbucks doing global retail art program, I was really in the shift from visual communications to I used trend in my visual communications for the first time at Starbucks, and it was powerful. And then I ended up starting meeting Rainier, starting to send me around the world. So this change and shift into the line to the beginning of the line, but always carrying with me the tools of how we communicate. I could design my own, presentations to inspire visually and verbally. But at that point, I met IDEO. And this changed my life because IDEO is brilliant. And I, for 2 years, consulted with them, but they saw in me something beyond what I saw in myself. So they fostered that, brought it forward, learned from me. And then after 2 years, I was on to other things, right? But what happened there is initially I had to explain to people that trend is not just color and fashion. Although those can be powerful purveyors of change in our world, but that isn't how I focused on it. Trend really is how is culture moving to influence our choices based on human community, ethnography, brand anthropology, to future archaeology, to how, and these are concepts that I brought forward to IDEO and explained to them that I'm not doing, but sometimes doors were absolutely closed because they thought that's what trend was. So I was a part of the groups of people, swaths of people bringing forward an expanded idea of trend. And then it started to go into insight and into intelligence. Mm-hmm. And then we gained a certain amount of recognition. And so IDEO taught me, each time I brought my points of view into the company, they pounded it and made it better with me. And they taught me how to make this really relevant for companies. And they've taken many turns. And like us, they are now to the future, are really more interested in putting pods within companies to help walk side by side with them to bring in the future with actual skills.
I didn't realize that's what they were doing now. There's actually I didn't realize how much of our thinking and approach is so similar, Jody. So did you ever watch the movie The Man Who Knew Infinity?
No.
With Dev Patel and Jeremy Irons, and you would love this movie. It's a true story about Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician at the turn of the century, who was just a savant mathematician, and then he was invited into Cambridge so that he could publish his work more broadly. But it was the whole movie is this exploration between what is innate or intuitive, which sort of comes to you, versus what has to be like grounded in all this rigorous, proofing of things so the rest of the world can trust it and believe it. And there's a couple of really phenomenal exchanges where one sort of, again, the passion that Ramanujan had for the beauty of the universe and how it was translated into mathematics versus, the Cambrian version of you have to, dot your I's and cross your T's 37 ways, otherwise no one's going to believe what you did. And I just think that that's sort of it. I think that, for me and my work, I finally got to the point where I was like, I know something, but I don't know how I know it. And so I would sort of sit on it. And then 2 to 3 years later, the whole world would know it. I'm like, God damn it, I knew it, right? So I literally have on my whiteboard something I wrote years ago, which is I trust what I know and I share it, right? And not knowing exactly how I know what I know. But I just think that there's an antenna that I have It's not nearly as genius as the Ramanujan's, but there's an antenna that I have because I'm not spending time worrying about P&L. I'm not worrying about big HR issues. I'm not worrying about facilities management problems. I'm not worrying about all the things that so many of our clients and our collaborators have to work with. So I get like all my attention is toward like what is happening here, and then being able to make that somehow translated to others. So I think that your gift of communication is a really clear one. So I think I'm a pretty good synthesizer and decent with words, but your ability to communicate this stuff so visually and make it feel tangible for people, I think, is a big strength of your work.
Thank you. It's I am not a business person, but I am a person that wants to help people grok and get. I mean, I can synthesize lots of information really quickly, and it doesn't even appear that I have done that, because you have to be on the dime when you're dealing with so much in the world, like right now. And I live incredibly simply so that my field and in my mind is clear, and that, of course, is a future way of living. And when people over the years have come to me with projects and questions, I have to step up each time and design a way of addressing that. And that's how I've learned what's coming next, because the questions that people are asking me.
But here's an interesting question then, I think, again, because we talk a lot about why women are underrepresented in so much of what's being built into the future right now. It's part of the reason we started the Femme Futurists Society, is to try and encourage that from all ends, right? That people look more to women and that women actually have more confidence. But one of the issues is that as women, we have historically not been as confident stepping into ambiguity and uncertainty. We want to have it actually again. So perfectly shaped so when we present it to someone, there's no questioning of our genius or our ideas. And so what has given you the confidence to step into those questions that you don't know the answer to and find solutions for?
I wouldn't have a career if I didn't run toward that,
Right.
And I love the vague and the foggy, because to me, this indicates, oh my gosh, this is the future. And our role as people, but I would say as women, is to define that future and to help bring it forward. If you trust yourself, and I trust myself, that I have, all of the things that I wasn't seeing around me in business, empathy, I have, insight, I have connection, and I feel the community and what we need and all of these things. And I'm a feeler, I'm a thinker, and all of the things that have been missing, certainly in business. And then I apply the things I've learned from each company, because you and I go inside and outside of companies, and I learn so much inside of companies, and then I bring what I've learned. And then we know that the world gets bigger for both of us. And so after 18 plus years of doing this, and and then people take it a certain direction, analytics, and then you're like, and we can have the human story, and so this is our role, and this is where I find great fulfillment, being of service to a better future. I admit I am not a business person. I haven't taken all of this and turned it into a huge scalable business, but I have aligned with certain people who have learned how to do that, and I have contributed my heart and soul to them, like Rainier Evers, or Owen Rogers and Paul Bennett, and Suzanne Gibbs Howard, Howard Gibbs. These people have influenced me, and I've given my best to them. And
well, so there's like 3 different trains I want to go on right now. So you can choose. This is like the magic door. You have door number 1, number 2, number 3. Number 1, you can tell me more about what we're working on right now with the marketing arm and what's exciting about that. 2, we can talk about the work you do with Veronica Scott, because I met Veronica. And I was super excited when I read through your thing about what she had done in Detroit and this wonderfully humanitarian effort that she had, turning coats into backpacks and or sleeping bags, sorry. And I even have no idea what she's doing now, but I met her through a different channel. Or 3rd, which is if you were going to give advice to young women right now who are trying to think through this world and don't have that same confidence that you have either had from the beginning or that you've cultivated over this period of time, how would you wrap your arms around that? So there's your 3 choices: marketing arm, Veronica, or inspiring young women. Just
to sum up the marketing arm, I was able again, I purposefully choose certain things and they choose me so that I could go in and understand mid America. And I've always done big, Europe, Brazil, China, and then I wanted to understand America, mid America brands. And so I worked with them in understanding that. And that was great. I'm back now to working another thing under my tool belt, but I'm back now at Culture of Future, and I'm doing some design research, for new products that we are doing for our future home. So we'll see where that goes, and somewhat for the future home, and then also just some real. So I'm doing a mix of like basic American, like how do we move that big ship to. I just finished a project with more like smart products for home, just doing design research. These are brilliant men out of Austin, and and how do we move these paradigms forward in small incremental ways? So that's what I'm more focused on right now. But in terms of Veronica Scott, just to say I love her. We met in the funniest way. She was at a design conference, and I rarely attend conferences, as an audience member, but I remember sitting there and John Jay from Wieden and Kennedy was quoting me, and I felt, wow. And so I sat there, and then we went to go and get the evening event. And she couldn't get in because she's under 21. I couldn't get in because I forgot my ID, and I look young. And so we both stood there kind of like, darn. And so we started talking, and I said, hey, why don't I take you to dinner?
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Yeah, that's how we met. It was just like, and so we went, a couple of blocks, and I bought her dinner, and I heard about her idea as a student, and I'm like, yeah, this is your life's work. She's like, I'm not sure if it's my life's work, but I'm like, this is your life's work.
So why don't you describe it for people who are watching us? What was she doing?
Okay. She created a sleeping bag coat that is hybrid and workable, and her vision at the time was to provide this coat to a lot of the homeless people in Detroit who were freezing on the streets. And she now has ultimately created this amazing foundation supported by a lot of famous Detroit artists, Detroit corporations, in teaching people how to make the coats. So it's become a workforce and housing business, and it's a model that the world is really watching and following.
So she's so extraordinary, and it was so cool to see that you had been part of her mentoring and success.
I can take no credit in any way, shape, or form because she's done all this hard work, but I did introduce her to people along the way so that she could speak 5 minutes at the UN. And I love connecting people because that's how the world changes. So that she somehow spoke at an event that a San Francisco reporter saw her, and then she got her first bit of funding from that. So, in my own small way, I was like, you're a brilliant young woman. I introduced her to IDEO. I introduced her to so many people.
And that's awesome. But that's how this network, that's what this is about, really, yes. Right? Is about, and we've always talked about the Good Old Boy Network. There's an incredible creative network or sister network or entrepreneur network, whatever those networks are, in which we can share these resources. And it's the exact antithesis of what we've seen in the corporate world. We try and hoard it all and keep it all and assume that that's our currency is going to help us elevate this whole thing. I think what we're realizing, this is one of the big shifts, right, is that the more that we have this lateral network and the more that we're able to extend it and share with others, the richer we are in our work and in our ability to drive this, or to shape the future that we want to see.
And there are natural sharers like you and I, and some people have the shareability to the nth degree. You and I have that, and so it's a way that we have felt safe to build the new world. And then people like you and I, then, well, what do we keep for ourselves, and what do we want to build forward, so that then we can be living examples of success.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting when you talked about not being a business person. It's like there's a company in London called Zenteo. I don't know if you've ever come across them. XYNTEO. And they connected with me recently through a mutual person who liked my work and thought it'd be useful to chat with them. And it was great. These women are amazing. It's not just women, but the two women I was speaking to were great. Two or three of them, but they've really built a whole big business on what you and I do so intuitively and so naturally. I'm like, did I miss my calling? That somehow I didn't turn this into a team of 100 people or 200 people around the world that do yada yada. So there's this interesting thing about sort of where we are, I think, again, in the whole like kind of ecosystem of what it is that we do. I'm really pleased with my career. I'm really, really happy with where I am. And that's why I get back to the third door, which is, as people, part of what we're finding with this series is it's a lot of women in their 20s and 30s, maybe 40s, who are at this precipice and they're trying to figure out sort of where they really want to be. There is this intuitive longing to be able to be more authentically themselves, to be able to touch all those pieces of you that you have built a whole career around, that sit inside, folks that sit inside an office that don't often get a chance to do that. When I give talks, I'm sure it's the same with you. I get all these people come up to me and I become sort of their patron saint. Right? I always laugh that I'm the saint of the island of misfit toys, with people who can't quite figure out where they fit inside organizations because they have this toolkit of talents that aren't necessarily recognized inside the spaces where they are.
Right.
And increasingly are trying to find their way to do what you and I have built really, really successful careers doing.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah.
What do we keep for ourselves? As women, it is natural for us to serve the greater good. Now, maybe all women don't feel that way, but the women that I know in my industry feel this way. And
do you think it's only women that feel this way?
No, I don't. Rainier knows how to. He's Dutch. He knows how to build his business. He's brilliant financially, but he also has just started Business of Purpose, and it's really he's longed for this opportunity to give back, and so he is a man that I know, and there are many men that are that way. So it isn't just male, female, but
the way we think about it is like there are feminine traits versus women's traits. Right?
That's great. But just as a woman, and you have to understand that when I started out doing what I do, I was the only woman speaker, and I didn't even notice it. So I was the only woman speaker in that at Monterrey, Mexico Technology College, we were speaking on new technologies, and I was up there speaking, and a woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Gosh, it's so great that there's another woman speaker on the roster." And I'm like, there is? I had no idea that I was the only woman speaker.
Interesting,
for so many years.
Yeah.
I didn't. I was just doing my job. And so as time went by, I started noticing it. And I tell you, my role was as a woman to stand up and to take the flack. I had lots of people coming up, young people particularly, falling at my feet going, "Thank you, finally," putting their arms up in the air. Finally, someone's speaking in a way I can understand. And even though I'm older, I could speak the language of the future that included them and what they're doing, and how we as elders can hold the believing eyes for them and what they're doing and for what we're doing, and how it's not against one or the other. And then I would have other people that were perhaps, and admittedly, it was usually an older man or two in the audience that would give me flack. And, I remember it hurt my feelings, but you can't take any of this personally. It's like I realized from that, and I learned from that I have to include everyone in my conversation. I have to announce how old I am to start with, so they don't think that this is some young person up there just talking about young people. And I learned these things along the way, that everyone is included in this party for the future. And that is how, so it isn't women, it isn't men, it isn't a non-diverse cast of players. In fact, I promote that. It's a diversity of cultures and players that will help us solve the problems going forward. And so that's what I've learned from doing this. And I give each person the opportunity to do the mission and the missive play within themselves, and how that might align with what they're doing in the world.
What are you most passionate about at this moment? Like if there's something that you really wanted people to be lit up by, what lights you up right now?
I think the pandemic has really given each of us an opportunity. It's great to serve the world. Coming in closer, people like you and I need to know, well, what is ours? What are we doing that's personal? I'm finally allowing myself permission to have a relationship, or, have be my own creative expression. I loved archaeology, and I worked doing archaeology work when I was younger, and I loved, I worked in museums, and I loved, like, so now I'm reading all about that again, and I'm thinking, what could I do that might be? I tried to integrate what I was doing with future work, um, and call it future archaeology, so that I could bring back my ideas of what we look at and what we create and love and our object of love and creation, and how we expand that love to the energy around it, what it creates around it, sustainably or not, what it creates around it culturally or not. And so I've shared a lot of these ideas, and understanding that when we make something, this is the culture we're living into in the future. And I've tried to bring these ideas forward, and I think I've kind of shared my share, and now I'm looking at what do I want to actually build and make.
Yeah.
And I think this is where everyone's at.
Yeah.
I will continue to do interesting work with, like, we are not far enough along in terms of smart home products, in terms of, and that's what I was, just in small ways working on. And researching that was just kind of shocking to me that we aren't further along in that realm. And I think that there's a way to do healthy technology that will support us going forward. And that's kind of, I'm a little interested in that right now.
Yeah.
So.
Good. Well, I, again, just love watching someone. I think there's this path. Like, I just I got to see this incredible path of your work, past, present, and future. So when I was doing the research preparing for this, I was watching you on Dr. Phil. I'm like, oh my God, look at her on Dr. Phil. So to have gone from Dr. Phil to the world that you're in, and the work that you're doing right now, right? There's just this beautiful, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I keep picturing this like little sort of golden path I'm watching, this yellow brick road, Jody.
Yeah.
And I love the work that
you.
The essence that you bring to it, right? The way that you bring,
you
bring to the work.
It is yellow. It's a yellow brick road. I'm like a little Dorothy, just kind of like, they need this over here. Showing up with Toto. Seriously.
Well, I love the fact that there is actually, I hear it now in a couple of things that you've said about this idea of wanting to draw back in and figure out then what it is that you want to create and build. Because I do think that there's something more tangible that we're all sort of looking toward a bit, or want to help we construct, because we have a sort of a perspective on how it could be done. So I'm
smart
excited
technologies. Yeah, and I've done a lot of future of home projects, and like, I was hired by Chamberlain, and they are the garage door opener, and I thought, wow, this is what I've come to. But actually, it was the most glorious, and this is what we've come to. We've come to middle America and how we can expand the paradigm for everyone. And so that was one of my favorite projects, because it was about the future of the home and the things that I talked about, and the future of cars and the future of transportation. And the things that I've talked about in that research and in that report really were about how are we going to reconfigure the home as we spend much more time inside of the home,
right,
and work out of the home, and begin to create community-oriented businesses within our home. And how are we going to have things delivered? How are we going to get things, out to the supply chain? And these were things, and like, what will be the technologies that will support us in all of this, and how will that be in the bigger picture within the city, and within the, and it was all based on the ideas of future generations, Gen Z, Gen Y, and really understanding how they use technology, community, hackable positivity. And as I was able to define each generation and where they are going with this, this was before the pandemic. And these were all ideas that are so applicable now because of,
right,
and I had no idea. And so, it's all what's happening now.
right?
So,
but we're setting us up for next, right? Which I think is the part that's so great. Well, thank you for being an inspiration. Thanks for coming back into my world. I'm excited about paying more attention to your work as you move forward. And
thank you.
One of the things I will say, the Femme Futurists, we really are trying to amplify this idea of society and making our work more visible to others and ourselves more accessible to others, and trying to figure out how we can connect and support each other more. So stay tuned to what it is that we're going to be experimenting and playing with that. Again, the way I always talk about, with my colleague Emma and co-founder of this, is that this is a side hustle in addition to all the other stuff that we do. So it comes in waves where we get like really focused and then we kind of pull back for a bit, so it's not as consistent. But it is a really, really, really nourishing playground, and I'm really grateful that we created this a year ago, almost in May, because it's gotten me through the pandemic year. Is being able to connect with brilliant women who are shaping a future that I am excited to be a part of. So
brilliant woman, you. And last thing, Paxi Plaxis Chang is a woman that I did a lot of the same thing with you. She created Women of Impact. Impactmania.com. And so you can go on there, anyone can go on there and look at, she did thousands of interviews and did an exhibit, a book on women of impact. So I also did a passion work with her for multiple years, 5 years, where on the side hustle, we would interview people around the world women around the world doing amazing work. So anyone could go on there and look at, and if you have a certain topic, you can look at women doing things in that arena.
Love it. Because I think that's just it. When people talk to me about this, and this has been my narrative over the last couple of weeks, is that in Women's History Month, we can go back and say, okay, these are all the women that didn't get their due in the past, and we can we can excavate that stuff, and we can make those stories more visible, which are absolutely necessary. In the present, we can think about all the things in which we can structurally make it more accommodating for women. Not accommodating, but like the structures are set up in a certain way that don't necessarily fit women's lives. And so if we want women in these careers, we have to think through the structural sides of these things. But then the part where we really talk about more is that the future, when we think about who is generating, shaping, and benefiting from the value that's going to be created in the future, we are woefully underrepresented, and that we need to fix. And so I love that there's more of these platforms, experiences, networks, communities, whatever, that are out there that are continuing to raise the awareness and amplify the voices of, the better. So, yay.
And my website, during a pandemic, during an ice storm, I created my new website. So that is jodyturner.com. I've never really claimed my own name as my...
Right.
It's always been
that's
under...
like a really interesting thing. We did that a few years with Giordano.com, and I had resisted. Finally, okay, and leaned into it. And I'm like, it's actually really fun. I kind of like it.
Yeah.
So, well done.
Yeah, so Jody with a Jody Turner.com, and you can go on and you can see that I talk about just a bit of the history. It's so light. Everything should be light today and quick and easily grokkable.
Yeah, but that's great. Perfect resource. So
thank you,
sister. And we are going to stay in touch, and we're going to pull you into other things.